So Gothic is a very much a European style, but it has influences that are different as compared to the Greek and the Roman world. And then we have the Renaissance happening, which you're probably all familiar with. This is the time of Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and so on. And what happens at this time is that there is a rediscovery of antiquity, of the classical world. And this brings with it a remix, a reshuffling, a restyling of ancient elements. So here we start having columns again. We have right here we have festoons that were typically featured on Roman temples. So this is it's kind of like Renaissance. It's kind of like a revival style in a way of Greek and Roman ancient style. But it's very much, I would say, it's got its own elegance, but it's very much in your face. It's very heavy in a way, right? And mostly just carved wood. So it's very massive. Usually this style is very massive, and it employs carving more than any other technique. What happens is that then, just like any style, it evolves into something more gracious. That some people would disagree with this. Some people think Baroque is very heavy, and that's fair. But as compared to Renaissance, it's more gracious, and it starts taking on colors, and the classical elements also become more abstract. So there's more variety, and it becomes more complex also, if you will. So this is very ornamented, but maybe not complex in terms of composition, whereas this you can see how very complex and detailed it is. So this is Baroque, and you probably have heard about the Rococo as well. You may have, some of you. And this is it got so complicated in a way. It got so elaborate, so fine, that by the mid-18th century, there was kind of like a, you could say, revolution in many ways, because it's the time of the Enlightenment, and it's also a time in which design became sober again. So this is their version of minimalism. So we have minimalism now, you know, Japanese style and Scandi style. Well, this was their version. So their version was like, hey, their idea was like, hey, things have gotten out of hand. This is too much. This is crazy. Let's pare it down again and go back to where? Go back to the origin. Go back to the start. Okay? So very clean design, very elegant, using again Roman and Greek elements. So because this, in a way, because this was a revival style, okay, it was an attempt to bring back to life the glory of the style of ancient Rome and ancient Greece. What followed after that were a plethora of revival styles. So this is a Renaissance revival. This is not a Renaissance from the Renaissance times. This is about 200 years ago. This was 600 years ago. But it was made using ornaments in an overall composition that harkens back to the Renaissance. So during the 19th century, you have a lot of revival styles. So for example, the chair that we will look at in more detail that Ajahn is sitting on, that is a revival Renaissance chair. So it's not actually from the time of the Renaissance, but it's made in the style of the Renaissance. Okay? So Renaissance. This was also still a time of looking back at the past. It has, of course, and I would love to talk about it, we probably don't have time and this is not the right place, but it has implications with politics and philosophy and history of the time, of why they looked back at the past around this particular time. After, in the 19th century, they had done all that you could think of, so they went and looked for inspiration in Japan, they went and looked for inspiration in ancient Egypt, in the Renaissance, and they had done it all. New style unfolded, which is maybe the first, some people consider it to be, and I do as well, the first modern style, which was Art Nouveau, that took different shapes in different countries. And why was it modern? Is because it rejected the heritage from the Greek and Roman times. So this was in opposition to what was officially popular and famous, which were references to the past. So all of you are aware of, I'm sure you are, of the Impressionists, Monet and such, that kind of rebel the academic trend of the time. Well, this style was the same. This style was a rebellion to this very formal style in order to focus on pure aesthetic, kind of like a free style, okay? To us now it looks old, okay? It looks formal as well, but at the time it was something very fresh. It's kind of like, okay, this is a good comparison. This was kind of like the Zaha Hadid of the time, you see, with the contemporary organic shapes. Around this time, we also have important developments in technology, which allow for furniture to be made industrially. So, for example, the chairs that some of you are sitting on, again, these are not carved chairs. So these are made with a technique that I'll tell you more about later. So this allows for furniture to be accessed by everybody, whereas something like this was something that only a king could have, right? Or a nobleman. It was not for everyone. But around, well, let's say throughout the 19th century, you have a middle class arising. And this middle class also wants furniture. And then you start having more and more people being able to afford kind of like what we would call mid-range style of furniture. And this is why these different styles develop, okay? So we move from something that is luxurious to something that everyone can afford in kind of like a democratic way. So this is just overview of the evolution of furniture. I don't know if I should take a break. No? Okay, all right. If you have any questions, you can, you're very welcome to ask, you know, because I want to make sure that this is interesting, but there's so much to talk about that I have to choose what to focus on and what not. So let's look at the furniture we have here and how it relates to this timeline. Okay, so this is the chair that we were just talking about, and this is a model from the Renaissance. It's an X chair just because of the construction. It's also known as a Dante chair from the famous poet. And well, how can we tell it's a Renaissance chair? We know, you can tell by the carvings here. So you can see, thank you. So you can see this type of scroll work was very popular during the Renaissance. The shell motif. If you know of the, well, I didn't include it in the presentation, but there's a painting by Botticelli of a Venus being born from a shell. So shell is also an element that we often see in architecture, in painting, and in furniture. I also want to mention that, of course, the development in architecture and furniture, they went hand in hand, right? So this is a facade of a Renaissance-style church in Florence, and you can see how this is a cabinet. Well, it's basically a miniature building. It's massive, but you can see how Renaissance furniture relates to architecture directly. Okay, it's almost like a direct copy on a smaller scale. Main feature of Renaissance furniture, as I mentioned before, is a lot of carving. So you will not find inlays, you will not find bronze, you will not find, almost never find painting, okay? You will see just the wood carved as much as possible, like sometimes like a very overwhelming way, okay? So this was the Renaissance. You can see this chair, this particular chair, in Renaissance style interior. So this is what Renaissance looks like. Okay, it's not the neoclassical golden style and white with a chandelier. It's very much medieval in a way still, okay? So there's the chair. Revival, that's the period. Revival of Renaissance. Next one. The next one is much later. So next one is a neoclassical piece of furniture. This comes from after the Baroque period, so after the ornament was dropped, after they went back to a simpler style. And what are some features of this style? This is a Louis XVI style. Often the styles take the name of the king. That was, well, there was king at the time of this style being most popular. This is a Louis XVI, and how do we know? Well, it's very clean. This is a late Louis XVI. It's very clean, and we know it's a Louis XVI because of some features, such as this inverted obelisk tapering legs that are features of the Louis XVI style. So this is an interior in the Louis XVI style. This sofa is Louis XVI. This chair, not white. I'll show you why. You can see in this picture the main difference between Baroque and neoclassical style. So you see how this is very straight and geometric, okay? There's no curves. Here there's a bit of a curve, ignore this for now. If you look at this chair at the back, this chair has a cabriole leg, which is these S-shaped legs that you also see in this is how furniture had to have several functions if possible. Remember that it was very expensive to get furniture. Again, you couldn't go to IKEA and spend 2,000 baht and get something. Okay? You had to think carefully, what do I want this piece of furniture to do for me, for how long? So this is called a secretaire. It's kind of like a desk in disguise. And when it's closed, and later we will play with it a bit, and you'll see when it's closed, it's just like a chest, whole chest of drawers basically. You can use it as storage. At the same time, if you drop this front lid, well, it turns into a desk, and inside you have all these drawings where you can store. Well, at the time you could store letters, you know, knickknacks, pen, ink, and some of the drawers are secret. And you'll see again, our secret, because this is a very magic, this is a very private kind of cabinet, you know? So even if you can open this, if you don't know that there's a drawer there, well, that's where you can keep your love letters or whatever, right? So secretaire, by this time, because we're during the neoclassical period, ornament, you know, carving fell out of fashion, was not really trendy anymore. How did they make furniture more elegant and beautiful? A way of doing that was using wood veneer. So very thin layers of wood that were basically stuck on top the construction, the carcass of the cabinet, in order to give it a more pleasing appeal. Again, how do we know? One more way we can know this is a neoclassical piece of furniture is the handle we have on top, which is in the shape of a swan in the classical style, which is an element that comes from Greek and Roman mythology. So it's all these small details will tell you the story and the style of the cabinet. Another one, yet another drop leaf secretaire, this time with a different shape, the same function. Again, you drop the front leaf, we will see it soon, and then you have access to a lot of drawings and you can use this for writing. Huh? Otherwise, it's just a chest of drawers. So, again, Louis XVI, neoclassical period, how do we know it again? Well, look at the lines, you see, very straight. We find the same style of leg as we had earlier, you see? This inverted kind of pyramid obelisk shape. And there are some elements that are distinctive of the style, which this is a ribbon and a festoon that were popular in the Louis XVI furniture. Again, look at how it's not all over the place. You see, there's not like festoons or ornaments everywhere, but just on the handle, like a tiny detail of elegance. how to make furniture expensive at this time, how to make it look fancy at this time. Like I said earlier, no ornament, not much gold, but showing off the skills, let's say. So we will look in detail about the inlays of the wood, how they use different types of wood to create these geometric designs, which I find very modern. You look at this panel, for example, of how they use the vein, the grain of the wood in order to create this symmetric pattern. And this was the decoration at the time. Very subtle, very elegant. So because of this, we know the period. Last, so we don't have this example, we just solved it, so we couldn't have it here, but it's the same principle of the chairs that you're sitting on, okay? This is, let's say, the more the top of the tier kind of chair using this process. Here we are in the Art Nouveau period, so this is around 150 years ago, now to 100. So at this time, this is where the revolution that ushered into modernity happened. At this time, we start having catalogs, which was something that, well, it existed to some extent, but these are catalogs for the general public, where you could just pick a model, basically, and just order it. Why? Because the production happened in factories already, and even though this still has kind of like a handmade charm, well, it was made industrially, by instead of carving wood, we have the S cabriole shape, same as we had before, but before it was carved by hand, so imagine a very time-consuming process, whereas now it's just bent. The wood is bent with steam, and we start having brands. So this is also the start of brands. In the past, before this, so all through this period, you had some cabinet makers that were maybe popular, but they were small shops with maybe 5 and 6 staff working there. Now we have actual brands, logos, and factories that you can order from, even if they're in another country. So it starts becoming the same way of using and buying furniture as we do today around this time. And these chairs are exactly that. So these kind of chairs, they were made in the thousands, right? Okay, I try to be as fast as possible so that we can looking at the furniture. Before we move on, if you want to ask anything, you please do. Or you can also ask later if you want to ask because of what we just talked about. You're welcome to talk. Okay. I didn't do, I sold it. I bought it and I sold it. I didn't, no, I didn't. This is made by this factory, Joseph. Here, yeah, here, here, and there, and there. Why have they been removed there? I think, well, I'm gonna guess this is just a different way of supporting the back. Since here they use the support in the corner. Right. Whereas, right, so here they're using the bracket. Right, it's a different design. So this is not the exact same model, right? So this is the catalog from this manufacturer, but they had hundreds of models. So if you prefer the one with the bracket, it would be this one. Otherwise, but you can see also the finish would be different. So you could customize it, right? But overall, the model was similar in that factory, right? Jacob and Joseph Koch, they were kind of in Austria. So they were kind of competitors of Condé, which is much more famous. But the same principle, band food, almost the same, right?
Yeah, I show here.
Yeah, oh, right, yes. So this is that chair in the picture was drawn by
Student.
the student.
She is. Where is she? This is a.
Right, so this was the label that was actually under the chair, right? That's like the brand, the logo.
Okay. Should take a break.
So, anything else?
If you have no question,
I think when you make a demonstration between the levels of furniture, countryside furniture that you mentioned, right? Which is eventually very difficult to identify areas because they're hyper-simplified.
Right. So
there exists complicated parallel to the furniture structure.
yes.
And there's a kind of countryside.
Right.
And amazingly simplified and sometimes extremely thick. They don't know how to deal with it with the tools at the time. It's farmers were doing it for themselves, right? And I think it's interesting to compare the countryside nature to the middle class nature or to higher class nature at the time. As your equation and thickness values. You showed a beautiful tableau.
Right. So I showed the beautiful because those are the one of them. Right. So this, that's why I go back to it. So I get back to this because, as I mentioned, we can expand on this a bit. This is a very interesting point. There were models that were used, but depending on how affluent the person was, someone could afford something like that. Someone could only afford something like this. So we're not throwing the Alps, for example. Most people would have had something like this unless they were very rich. So of course it becomes a lot more difficult to identify the period because we have these elements, right? These elements in terms of style. And I decided to use examples that are very clear about the style of someone who but it's very fascinating going try to understand when a chair would have been made or where is it from. And because there's less elements to tell. This is more of the direct specifically. That would be right, yeah, so it's parallel in a way. And you see this just like today, so the style of the rich people have viewed for themselves and people in the concept of like adapt way. That's also this way today we have like a luxury brand that someone copies it for clothing or product, whatever you say is occurring.
What is interesting is how this can be divided comparing to what was the trend at the time, and how there are some very some sure I don't experience many countryside, they look extremely simple, modern and very strong. Then in the 6th century, they were mostly done by carpenters staying in the village.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's very fascinating. Yeah.